At the first minute of July 6, 2018, this short line was added to Chapter 99 of the Harmonized Tariff Schedule of the USA. From this moment, new pneumatic rubber tires intended for use on aircraft, parts of pumps imported with machines for the production of pulp, paper, or cardboard, machines for mixing mineral substances with bitumen, spherical roller bearings, primary lithium cells and batteries, a fuse rated for a voltage not exceeding 1000 V, and about 278 other products will be subject to a 25% import tariff when imported from China to the USA. This is a minor change affecting goods worth $36 billion. Became the first step in the confrontation that would later be known as the trade war between the USA and China. Subsequent actions were not long in coming. Just a few weeks later, the Trump administration initiated a second package affecting goods worth approximately $16 billion. Then in September, following China's response, a massive package of 10% tariffs on goods was introduced, amounting to approximately $200 billion. After another round of retaliatory actions from China, these rates were raised to a staggering 25%. Now, a Chinese heater that could have been sold for $48 would cost $60. Or more likely, the American distributor would seek suppliers from other countries that are not subject to tariffs in order to keep the price at $48. As a result of all this, trade volumes from China to the USA decreased by 8.5% and, in the opposite direction, by 26.3%. But perhaps even more significantly, this dispute shifted China from its position as the leader in the list of USA trading partners. Now Canada has moved to a higher position, taking second place, and Mexico has become the new largest trading partner. However, the trade war was far from the only reason preventing China from regaining its leadership. The next problem was not caused by Washington, but of course by Wuhan. After news headlines were filled with reports about a mysterious new coronavirus in China, then about the global spread of COVID-19, followed by worldwide lockdowns, then the rapid development of a vaccine, and finally about the large-scale deployment of vaccination in developed countries. The summer of 2021 was marked by chaos in supply chains. With savings accumulated during the lockdown but still facing obstacles to spending on restaurants, concerts, and airline tickets, American consumers began buying a lot of things, tangible goods. However, COVID-19 continued to have an impact. Dock workers and truck drivers in California were still getting sick, while their colleagues in China, Vietnam, or India mostly remained unvaccinated or vaccinated with less effective vaccines, which meant adhering to stricter social distancing measures and restrictions that slowed down shipping and production. The end result of this was that it made headlines in the news. Factories were unable to produce goods quickly enough. Ships were anchored off the coast for weeks, waiting to be unloaded, while the shelves of American stores remained empty as goods simply could not arrive in time. By the end of 2022, the crisis of capacity in trans-Pacific shipping had largely subsided. Supply and demand have balanced out, and container shipping rates have nearly returned to 2019 levels. However, supply chains have not been able to fully recover as the conflict in Ukraine has caused significant damage to global trade. Sanctions have disrupted the supply of key metals, global energy and food costs have risen, and maritime and air freight have been redirected to bypass the warring country. Again, modern China is clearly not what it used to be. Although this may be common knowledge, until recently, rapid economic growth had been the norm for decades, but now the country has entered a new era. The briefest account of the reasons for China's unprecedented economic rise boils down to one factor: low-cost production. China was a place where foreign companies could effectively relocate production and significantly save on costs due to the low cost of labor. But in many ways, the country's industrial sector has become a victim of its own success. Over 20 years, GDP per capita in the country has increased tenfold. And along with this, the quality of life has significantly improved. Major Chinese cities such as Beijing, Shanghai, or Shenzhen have started to resemble Tokyo, London, or New York, with similar shops, restaurants, and hotels. The luxury goods market has experienced a boom, as an incredible number of millionaires and billionaires have emerged, and a true middle class has formed, living at the same level as in the USA, Europe, or any other developed country. But for the outside world, for companies that had previously relocated their production to China, this increase in purchasing power meant that the dollar no longer held the same value within the People's Republic of China. Wages were rising, and along with them, production costs were also increasing. The peak of direct foreign investment inflow into China has long passed, as multinational corporations are now focusing on other countries with the lowest production costs. But this concerned the country little, as it was able to use the wealth accumulated during that period to develop a number of its own companies. There are giant e-commerce platforms such as JD.com and Alibaba, huge technology conglomerates like Tencent and Huawei, unicorn startups like DJI and DiDi, and even the first non-American social platform that became popular worldwide, TikTok, owned by ByteDance. However, TikTok is a rare exception. In the overwhelming majority of cases, business between China and the USA is tied not to services but to physical goods. Physical goods need to be physically delivered to the American end consumer. But the problem that is now becoming obvious is that America is really very far from China. Shanghai is the busiest container port in the world, while Los Angeles and Long Beach are the busiest ports in the USA. So, flights between them are organized as frequently as possible. But this is not the simplest task. From the moment the Chinese shore disappears over the horizon, the vessel will not see Los Angeles for another 18 days, provided that everything goes according to plan, and often it does not. Even with significant improvements since the chaos in supply chains in 2021, the schedule reliability of major container carriers is only between 50 and 60%. Outsourcing, just-in-time production, and even globalization are all terms and phenomena that have significantly developed over the past 30 years. In fact, some experts consider the fall of the Berlin Wall to be the beginning of a serious globalization, but this era may retrospectively be viewed in the context of the constraints imposed by the trade war, COVID-19, and the conflict in Ukraine. Thus, the year 2023 in the world of logistics is marked by a consolidation of concerns. COVID-19 and Ukraine have revealed vulnerabilities, and there is serious widespread concern that this may only be the beginning. Therefore, the consensus is that there are essentially only two options. One can strengthen the global supply chain by creating more reserves in the system, ordering components earlier, holding more inventory, and producing goods in advance, but this comes with real and significant costs. The second option is to eliminate the risk by removing the physical and political gap between the producer and the market. This approach has unexpectedly gained popularity. All that is needed is an alternative. Another developing country on the other side of the Pacific Ocean with low wages and a large labor force. A country like Mexico. From a manufacturer's perspective, Mexico is not ideal. Out of 180 countries, ranked by the Corruption Perception Index, Mexico ranks 128th. Out of 190 countries ranked by ease of doing business, Mexico ranks 60th. Among the 50 busiest seaports in the world, there is not a single one in Mexico. Its largest port, Manzanillo, has nearly 6 times less volume than the ports of Los Angeles and Long Beach. Additionally, difficulties with transportation within the country further complicate the situation. The sharp ridges of the Sierra Madre stretch from the northwest to the southeast. Arid deserts cover much of the north, while dense forests blanket a significant portion of the south. What about the roads and railways with bridges crossing these mountain ranges and cutting through deserts and forests? Infrastructure in Mexico is developing, but it still lags significantly behind that of China. However, despite the challenges of perception, outdated practices, and difficulties with internal transportation networks, Mexico has one simple geographical advantage that no other country can boast of except for Canada. It borders the largest economy in the world. Although the Rio Grande is not actually navigable, it hosts one of the most important hubs in North America, connecting Texas and the Mexican state of Nuevo León, an international bridge of global trade. It is exclusively a commercial 8-lane road. More than 6,000 trucks heading north pass through it daily. Since its construction in 2000, it has never been busier. As of 2022, this land hub ranks first among American entry points in terms of trade volume. And this increased significance and accumulating traffic are largely related to the fact that production in northern Mexico can offer what China cannot. Speed and flexibility at a low cost. About 150 miles or 250 kilometers along Mexico's Highway 85, not far from the small town of Salinas, Victoria, lies this vacant lot. However, it is not just an empty lot. It is the Hofu-San Industrial Park, a complex covering an area of 81 hectares, built as part of a private China-Mexico partnership, with the aim of attracting Chinese manufacturers. This is a new park, the construction of which began in 2017, and satellite maps have not yet had the chance to capture its development, but it already exists, and that is quite bold. The main task is to attract more than 100 Chinese manufacturers to this closed park. To build a residential area for accommodating employees and create a range of services, from Chinese restaurants to hotels and hospitals, it is planned to organize a small piece of China there, where the labor resources are stable and Chinese leaders and operators will be able to feel at home. Most of the area still resembles a construction site 6 years later, and the shiny master plan is far from realization. Nevertheless, the trend is moving in the right direction. Hisense, an electronics manufacturer, has already come here. Furniture companies Kuka Home, Sunon, and Manhwa have also joined, and neighboring them are the Chinese manufacturers Fawa, Skyish, Asenstar, and Bellenturf. All of them have invested in the project. The prospects, especially after the start of the trade war, have made production in Mexico more price competitive and are extremely enticing. Even despite the lack of restaurants, shops, and housing that should make relocation more attractive and integration smoother, Chinese companies are ready to invest, both within the Hufusan Park and beyond its borders. For example, the technology company Lenovo has been manufacturing near Monterrey for over 10 years. And only in 2022 did 44 different Asian companies open new manufacturing facilities in Mexico. At the same time, 9 out of 10 largest companies are Chinese-owned, and 7 of them opened in the state of Nuevo León. Apart from the state, here is a chart of Chinese investments in Mexico showing a clear upward trajectory. Although concerns about safety and the suitability of the infrastructure still persist, the terms of the deal are too good to ignore. Of course, a few dozen companies relocating over the decades do not necessarily indicate Mexico's transformation into a global factory, or that China is stepping away from this role, or that this is the end of outsourcing as we know it. This is just a small sample, but the reasons why companies are moving to Mexico will not disappear, and the attractiveness of manufacturing in Mexico is evident not only to China. China may be a new partner for northern Mexico. Japan, South Korea, and the USA have been there for a long time. The value of the region has been well known to industrial manufacturers for decades. Many years before the creation of NAFTA, Mexico worked to maximize the appeal of its low labor costs and proximity to the USA by establishing a maquiladora system. Essentially, these are factories with low costs and tax incentives owned by foreign companies, which, as government officials hoped, would help reduce unemployment and attract foreign investment. With the advent of the era of free trade, the number of such factories has increased. Initially, automotive companies such as Kia, Toyota, BMW, Ford, and Audi, among others, began to actively emerge in northern Mexico. Then came others, such as Lego, Samsung, LG, GE, and many other well-known brands. Their mass presence transformed the Mexican economy. According to the analysis by Maquiladora, there were about 5,055 such factories in the country in 2012, mainly in the north, and they provided jobs for more than 2 million Mexicans. The value of these factories also lies in the fact that they helped change the perception of the Mexican states as too dangerous and unpredictable for business locations, turning them into regions ready to become a new manufacturing hub for companies from around the world. What Mexico has been able to offer in recent decades has proven too attractive to pass up. Factories already exist. The salary, although higher than in some Eastern developing countries, is still low. By being here, companies not only avoid tariffs but also operate in a Western business environment where the protection of patents and intellectual property is a priority. Political risks are lower, and the negative aspects of outsourcing have been minimized. Simply put, aside from other factors pushing Chinese manufacturers abroad, Mexico has proven to be incredibly attractive on its own. Automakers and electronics manufacturers from around the world made northern Mexico their second home decades ago, fundamentally changing the Mexican economy and creating a mutually beneficial system for the country and companies that seems poised to continue thriving. But China was simply the last to recognize the incredible attractiveness of this region, so Mexico has both geography and a workforce, as well as demand. It seems that all the elements for an economic boom are in place, except for a critically important plan. President López Obrador and the federal government largely ignore the industrial sector. The main work on attracting and stimulating the manufacturing sector is carried out at the state level. States like Nuevo León have long focused on developing their manufacturing sectors, building industrial parks, providing financial incentives, and coordinating with incoming companies. And this has yielded results. And this is despite the fact that in terms of population, Nuevo León ranks 7th. In terms of gross domestic product, it is in 3rd place, surpassed only by Mexico City and the state that surrounds it. This means that the gross domestic product per capita in the state is comparable to that of Malaysia or Greece. Nuevo León, in general, is one of the safest Mexican states, much like many regions in the USA. For these reasons, Monterrey has become the second largest center for attracting investment in the country after the capital, home to the tallest skyscraper in Latin America, one of the most modern metro systems in North America, and an astonishing variety of elite hotels and restaurants. Other northern Mexican states followed its example, working on the development of their own manufacturing sectors oriented towards the USA. Nevertheless, the current leaders of the country continue to ignore these opportunities. The president has faced criticism for not paying enough attention to the country's industrial sector during a period that could have been decisive. To be honest, he has focused on fighting crime. This is justified. The country is experiencing a devastating wave of violence that has led to the murder rate being the 8th highest in the world, but its efforts to curb crime overall have proven to be ineffective. The USA is also concerned about crime in Mexico due to its consequences. According to surveys of Republicans before the elections in the USA in 2022, immigration became the second most important issue after the economy. American conservatives in particular are concerned about the exceptionally large number of migrants crossing the border between the USA and Mexico through both official and illegal routes. One of the main reasons for concern is violence. Of course, upon closer examination, poverty is considered one of the primary causes of violence. This is a connection that has been repeatedly confirmed by scientists. Poverty also provokes migration. Thus, economic growth leads to a reduction in violence and a decrease in the number of migrants at the border. Mexican production nowadays rarely displaces American production. Rather, it replaces Chinese production, which means substituting a distant country with a questionable reputation regarding human rights and intellectual property for a culturally and politically important neighboring ally. This serves the global goals of the USA. Moreover, the economic growth driven by this phenomenon helps to address other American challenges. This is essentially a virtuous cycle. And the only thing to regret is that the federal authorities of Mexico and the USA have not fully realized this yet. This industry could become the solution to the problems that, according to officials on both sides, need to be prioritized. But unfortunately, for a long time they were focused on alleviating symptoms rather than addressing the real causes. Mexico is already considered a powerful industrial economy of middle income with good geography and a large number of skilled workers. And it seems that she is finally starting to receive the economic profit she deserves. But this happened largely in spite of the ineffective infrastructure, the destructive violence, the inert government, and numerous restrictions. Therefore, a future in which Mexican production grows due to something looks appealing. Just imagine a future where Mexico realized its potential to the same extent that China did 4 decades ago.